Hi, I'm Terry Ammerman with the Terry Ammerman Group. When we work with our corporate clients, we always talk about the 4 C's: control, confidence, credibility, and connection. And this year, I was honored to do a talk with one of Mina Irfan's sessions, one of her intensives, and I talked about those 4 things. And I was so pleased at the response that I got from the women in the room. As I've said in my other videos, I love working with women. And I really believe that over the years that I've been doing this, that I have learned some things as a woman that can help you to communicate more effectively. And communicating more effectively means getting done what you want to get done. So let's talk about control. Control is about making happen what you want to make happen. So let me ask you this. Can you control a conversation? The answer to that is not really. You can control what you say, but you can't really control what someone else is going to say. What you can do, however, is learn the best ways to communicate to reduce the chances of that person getting super defensive, getting really angry. And then you can also control the conversation to reduce the chances of you being in a situation that you are simply no longer available for. For example, are you available for people yelling at you? Are you available for people shutting down and ignoring you for 3 days? Maybe not. And as you grow and do inner work and get more confident about who you are, and we'll talk about confidence in the next video, you may not be available for those types of situations. So what do you do about that? One of the things that I believe in, and I actually follow this, is that when you are going to have an important conversation, plan it out. So plan the words that you're going to say. Plan that you are going to talk about values, talk about what you're both dealing with, or what you're dealing with a group of people in a particular situation. Eliminate things that are going to make them feel defensive. So how do you do that? Well, you don't start with, you know what, you did it again and I'm sick and tired of this. And I've said this in other videos. If you are ready to give someone a piece of your mind, then you are not ready to have an effective conversation. You might be ready to have a conversation, you're ready to talk, but you're not ready to have an effective conversation where you may be able to get something done. So what do we mean by get something done? Can you change behavior? Not necessarily. So if you are going into a conversation saying, well, what I need you to do is, then that usually doesn't work. At least in all of my years of experience of both communicating and training people to communicate, what people truly react to is natural consequences. So that may be, for example, that you can say to, let's say to your husband, it's really important to me that you call me and let me know what time you're going to be home for dinner. I love cooking for you and I want to have a hot meal ready. Now, that's an example. Maybe we don't cook for our husbands. Maybe it's just, I want to plan and decide if we're going to cook something at home or go out to dinner. Well, you have that conversation. He says, that's fair. And he decides that he's going to do that, but he doesn't do it. So what do you do about that? You change your behavior because you're not going to change his. How do you change your behavior? You can do a couple of things. You can decide that you're going to either order dinner in or cook dinner or whatever it is you do to get a meal ready for your family, and it's going to be ready at 6 o'clock every night. And if he's there, great. And if he's not, he's not. If you do that consistently, your kids, your husband, they'll get the message. But the thing is, and I've learned this, and it's something that's really been laying on my heart as I've started this channel, you're not going to be a good communicator if you haven't done your inner work. In other words, you've got to know what you want. You've got to have respect for yourself and know what you want. So as you develop that respect for yourself, then it is within your rights to put healthy boundaries around yourself, around what you say, around what you do. So let's say you're at work and someone starts yelling at you about a report that you turned in or something. You have every right to say, I want to hear what you have to say. I want to do good work, but I really can't hear what you're saying when you're yelling at me. And then stop talking. Here's one of the things that can tend to happen. When we get very anxious, we're nervous, we're defensive, we start talking a lot. We say way more than we need to. And we think that it helps the situation, but it really doesn't. So if you're going to say to someone, I want to hear what you have to say, but I really can't communicate with you when you're yelling at me, and you stop, give that person a chance to react. If they keep yelling, you may have to say, again, I can't communicate with you when you're yelling, so I'm going to walk away. Now, I've said this in a video before, that takes guts. It takes guts. But that is when you start seeing behavior change. If someone comes up to you and they know that if they start yelling at you, you're going to walk away and they're not going to get said what they need to get said, they're less likely to do that. They're less likely to come in and yell at you. Now, there are situations that you decide you need to let go of, that you need to leave. However, my experience has been that you treat people how to treat you. And so when you know how you want to be treated and you are willing to do the same thing, you're willing to be a reciprocal of that treatment. What does that mean if you're a reciprocal? Well, you can't be really upset with someone yelling at you if you're yelling back. So you want to decide what your communication style is and what it looks like. You want to decide that you're going to be calm, not smiley, happy all the time. This is not at all about being a people pleaser. This is about laying emotional, energetic boundaries and then following up with good communication skills. That is the order in which it should be done and the way it's going to work for you. So what happens, and this has happened to me, I'll be honest with you, I have really created a lifestyle where not very many people yell at me, and I'm not triggered very often. So let me talk about what triggering is. Triggering is when you go into a situation, you're going to go talk with your son, you're going to have dinner with your family, and you've told yourself, it doesn't matter what anyone says, I'm not going to react negatively and get into an emotional conversation. Reacting negatively and getting into an emotional conversation is when you're triggered. You're triggered by something someone has said, and what that means is that there's some work for you to do. Now, maybe what they said was inappropriate, wrong, but if it really, really upsets you, that means there's some work for you to do. So, if you go in with the best intentions and then you're triggered and all of a sudden you wind up saying things you shouldn't have said to begin with, and it just gets out of control, then you go back and decide what you need to work on. And this stuff doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. There are some great books that you can read on conversations, critical conversations, on communication, on how to get your point across in a way that is done with confidence and an element of control. So again, if you want to get said what you want to get said, you're going to write it down ahead of time, prepare. I need to get these 3 things said. And then you may not get the reaction that you would hope to get, and that's okay. There is a lot to be said for getting the words out. It builds your confidence to get said what needs to get said, to learn how to communicate in a way that you can actually influence change. Now, very often, I would say a lot, maybe I'm guessing at this number, but I'd say 75% of the time, we wind up shooting from the hip in communication. Now, I live my life teaching people how to better communicate, whether it's in a crisis situation, in a presentation, in a conversation with a colleague. And in every one of those situations, I recommend preparation in advance, creating some key message points, deciding ahead of time what you want to say in advance, and deciding that even if the reaction is not what you want it to be, that you are going to stay on point. I went through a divorce years ago, and one of the things I learned to do was what was called the broken record technique. And what it was making a declaration, making a decision about something. Let's say, for example, at one point, I had teenage children, and we would make arrangements with their dad to pick them up, let's say, for example, at 3:00 in the afternoon. And he wouldn't show up at 3:00 in the afternoon. He may not show up until 4:30 or 5. So I made a decision, and this was not a decision, let me make this point. This was not a decision I made in a heated argument. This was a decision that I made after some thought, some prayer, and deciding what was best for my children. And how did I teach them healthy boundaries? So I decided that if he were more than an hour late, that they didn't have to go. They could go on with their day and do other things. Well, as you can imagine, that wasn't a popular choice. And so in that situation, when he would say, well, I can't always get there in time, and you don't know how busy I am, and blah, 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 I would just repeat, I've made this decision. I believe it's best for the children. And so this is what we're going to do in the future. And then he'd vent some more. And I would say again, I've made this decision. I put a lot of thought into this. And I think this is what's best for the children. And eventually, he caught on, because there was a time, and it was hard, when they weren't going. So what does this tell you? I'm sharing some very personal information here, but what it tells you is that in that situation, and let me just share, this was by the time I had teenagers. I didn't always have these calm conversations in the early days, because I was angry, I was upset, and let me tell you, I called my ex one day a despicable human being. And I have regretted that ever since then. In fact, here I am. I've been single for 25 years, and I still can picture standing in the parking lot next to his car, telling him that. And that is not who I am. That is not who I want to be. And I never did that again. And I wish I could take it back. So why am I sharing that with you? Be careful what you say. Use your words. Go into a conversation wanting to control what you're going to say and to influence change, to build intimacy, to solve problems, not to, air quote, give someone a piece of your mind. It may feel good for a moment. You may enjoy telling your friends how you stood up for yourself, but it doesn't work. All right, that's enough for today. That's a lot of good stuff. I will be back very soon to talk about the second C, which is confidence. This is a weekend video, so have a wonderful weekend. Bye.